Welcome to the Connect with BMC Helix ITSM and Remedy webinar. During today's webinar, you're able to ask questions of our panelists. The questions and answers, along with the webinar recording, will be published a week from today's date to our YouTube channel and communities. This topic is Digital Workplace Upgrade Best Practices, and Vaibhav Wadekar will take us through this content. Over to you, Vaibhav.
Thanks, Greg. As Greg mentioned, my name is Vaibhav Wadekar. I am Lead Premier Support Architect here at BMC Software. And today, we're going to talk about BMC Digital Workplace Upgrade Best Practices. We will look at the overview of BMC Digital Workplace. We then going to review the upgrade paths based on different versions of Digital Workplace. We will review then the installation process, followed by the social migration utility demo. We will cover some of the troubleshooting as part of this webinar. Lastly, we will discuss about some reference material. Let's dive into the overview. BMC sells BMC Digital Workplace solution as either BMC Digital Workplace Basic or Advanced. BMC Digital Workplace Advanced consists of two components: BMC Digital Workplace, BMC Digital Workplace Catalog. In short, BMC Digital Workplace Advanced is a solution suite that consists of two components to install. The first component, BMC Digital Workplace, also known as MyIT earlier, and it also can be known as DWP. The second, BMC Digital Workplace Catalog, also earlier known as MyIT Service Broker, or also can be called BMC DWPC. So throughout this session, I will call it out as DWP or DWPC. For today's session, we're going to talk about BMC Digital Workplace. When you perform the install of BMC Digital Workplace, depending upon your license subscription, you will choose Basic or Advanced. Choosing Advanced over Basic will have many features. I would like to describe what comes under Basics and what comes under BMC Digital Workplace Advanced. With Basic subscription, you can raise a self-service request, you can approve the request, you can search the knowledge article, you can have an SRM integration so that your existing SRT will automatically appear within the catalog. You can do a social timeline, you can broadcast, you can use DWP from your mobile as well as desktop client. You can do user reports via admin console. You can do a rebranding of application via DWP admin console. So these are some of the features that you're going to get with basic subscription. Let's say if you're going to the advanced, you'll get the additional features in addition to what is covered in basic. The addition will be you can able to integrate with enhanced catalog, which is nothing but you can integrate with BMC Digital Workplace Catalog. You can also integrate with virtual chat. You can set up appointments, you can set up locations, you can set up service health, avail the shopping cart, banners on behalf of impersonation of users. You can create bundles, you can have rating and reviews for your services, you can do service costing, you can do reporting, you can import a third-party catalog such as AWS catalog, and there are pretty significant list of connectors that you can use to integrate with a third-party system. Let's look at the diagram. As you can see on the right, we have BMC Digital Workplace client-side application, which is also known as Universal Client, which can be accessed through a browser, mobile client, such as iPad, iPhone, or Android devices. This is the end user interface. With this end user interface, end user can raise self-service requests that has been created from enhanced catalog. They can also set up or schedule a help desk appointment, and you can also request a stub that is pertaining to a my stuff. For example, day 2 actions. You can also see in the middle of the chart, we have BMC Helix Digital Workplace Admin Console. Admin console interface are only available for DWP administrator, with which they can rebrand the application, they can configure the sections for the catalog, they can set up how to, they can configure the help desk appointments. You can only access the interface through browser, and a person who's accessing this interface needs to have my IT admin privileges. Let's look at the left side of the diagram where you see the BMC Digital Workplace Catalog. BMC Digital Workplace Catalog can be used to create and configure the services. You can create independent service, you can create as part of bundle, you can create banners, you can create a day to actions which will be populated within my stub. As I mentioned earlier, there is a separate installer for BMC Digital Workplace Catalog. Let's look at DWP Upgrade Path. So depending upon the version you are coming, you have to upgrade BMC Digital Workplace in a certain way to get to BMC Digital Workplace 2002 version in order to get some of the social data that was saved in a Mongo and a combined Smart IT DWP database. We have had combined installers for both Digital Workplace and Smart IT until 1802 version of DWP and 2.0 version of Smart IT. In order to align with the product lines, we started to ship separate installer for both these components. If you are coming from an older version, BMC recommends you to have DWP on an additional hardware. The reason for it to have it on a separate server is you can perform upgrade of Digital Workplace independent of Smart IT, which requires ITSM stacks to be upgraded. Let's look at an example. If you're coming from version 3302 of MyIT, you will have to first upgrade to 1805, which will create a new DWP database depending upon the configuration you choose. And as part of this installation, you will run the data transfer and social migration utility. The social migration utility has to run in order to bring the Mongo data to this newly built DWP database. As you know, with 1805 version, we no longer required Mongo database. Let's look at another example. If you are coming from a really old version, let's say you are coming from a version 2.6. So in order to get to 2002, you'll have to jump a little hoops. You'll have to first come to 3302, then you have to do 1805. In 1805, you will do the social migration, and then you will run the upgrade to 2002. If you really think that the social data that was stored in the Mongo database is not important for your organization, you can skip the entire upgrade process and directly do the fresh install of BMC Digital Workplace 2002. So in future slides, we're going to talk about what data that is stored in the Mongo database. I would like to also highlight, in order to install Digital Workplace 2002, the minimum ITSM version required is 9104 of ITSM or higher versions. So in short, if you are running ITSM 9.1.04 version, you can still go to DWP 2002. Let's look at the installation process. I divided the entire installation process in these 7 blocks. You can see the prerequisites can be taking a VM snapshot, taking backup of your Smart IT and AR system database. As we are creating a new database, you can either pre-create the DWP database or you can have the installer to create a database for you. If you are provisioning the additional hardware for the secondary nodes, this is the perfect time to install Java, Tomcat on those secondary nodes. And at some point, if you would like to minimize timing on the production day go live, you can also install 2002 on the secondary node when you are building your QA. So on the day of production, you'll only upgrade one of the node, and the rest of the nodes that you can combine by pointing out the configuration file, which I'm going to talk about in future slides. So once you're done with the prerequisite steps, the next step is to run the 1805 installations. So once you've done the 1805 installation, as part of the installation, it will ask you whether are you using Smart IT, whether you are using only DWP, whether you would want the data transfer and data migration has to be done by the installer, or would you willing to take care of that as a part of post install. I normally recommend customers to do the migration as a post configuration step. The reason for that is the installation will complete quicker and then you have hold for the post configuration steps to correct yourself if you run into errors. So once you run the 1805 installation on the primary server, the next step for you is to run the data transfer and the social migration utilities. You'll have to make sure that you are using 1805 patch 1 utilities. And the reason that we are doing this data transfer in order to transfer the data from Smart IT database to newly built DWP database, as well as data that was stored in the Mongo database to this new DWP database. Once you're done with the data transfer and social migration, the next step for you is either run the 1805 installer on the secondary server. Let's say if you have 7 or 8 DWP servers, you can run the 1805 installer on all secondary servers in parallel. So there will not be any specific step that you have to run the installer one after the other. On the secondary nodes, you can run this installer in parallel. So once all the nodes is upgraded to 1805, then you can run the 2002 installation on the primary server. And once primary is being built, then you can proceed with the secondary servers with 2002. As I again mentioned, that you can run the secondary install in parallel in order to save time. Once your entire stack upgraded to 2002, then you start to look up some of the post configuration steps on primary and secondary servers. Like you can configure RSSO integration, you can configure the SSL if you would like to take care of the load balancer, because now the URL is going to get changed from /UX to /DWP. All those post installation tasks that you'll do as part of post installation configuration. Now we looked at the installation process. Let's look at what data is stored in Mongo database. If you're coming from an older version, you might have newsfeed and have an option to like, share, or delete in newsfeed. Some of this information also available in activity timeline. In 2002, we no longer have newsfeed in order to prevent the duplication of information. As part of service health, if you're following any services, updates to those services in terms of being available, partially available, maintenance, and comments on those services is part of the data that gets stored in Mongo database. Also, if you have any locations configured and if you have checked in, checked out to any location, which could be an office or a remote office, so any check-in, check-out or comments, that part of data also gets stored in the Mongo database. If you're following a person in the social timeline and you're adding a comments to the person's timeline, that data also gets stored in the Mongo database. And last but not the least, if you have any bell notifications, that data also gets stored in the Mongo database. Let me show you a quick demo of these items on my screens we discuss in this slide, as visuals is far better than just a text. As you can see on my screen, I'm using a DWP 1802 version. So this version does have a Mongo database. This is the Digital Workplace admin console. So whatever the data that you have populated here, this is the location management. If you have configured any floor map, if you have configured any help desk appointments, all this data gets stored into the Smart IT DWP combined database, right? Let me go to the end user interface now in order to understand what data that is stored in the Mongo database. So as you can see, I'm on the UI for Universal Client for DWP 1802 version. As you can see on my screen, I'm on this news feed. And as I mentioned, once you upgrade to 2002, you might not see this news feed because most of the items are either available in my activity and my stuff, and location will still be there. So one part of the data that gets stored in the Mongo database, as you can see that the person Paul is actually checked into the location. So you can see that data. So for example, if you have any locations defined and if you have any check-in, check-out data, so all this data, as you can see on my screen, gets stored in the Mongo database. The second part of the data is if you're following any services, so these are the services. So any comments or anything gets stored into the Mongo database. So if you click on like, all this data gets stored into the Mongo database. The other part that I would like to talk about is beside that. So if you're following a person and within the person timeline, if you're actually posting a comments, that part of data also gets stored at the Mongo database. And as you can see on my screen, I have this 3 bell notification. So this part of data also gets stored, the number 3 gets stored in the Mongo database. As we reviewed the installation process and also looked at what data that gets stored in the Mongo and Smart ID database, let's look at the high level component wise to give you a context on how long will it take to upgrade and what all component packages you need to download from EPD website to prepare for the upgrade. The first component that you had to install on ITSM stack is DWP 1805 ITSM integration patch. It only takes about 10 minutes, and if you are in a server group, this step has to be only executed once from the primary admin server. As you can see, the installer type is an installer, so you have to execute it as an installer. Second, the next step is to upgrade the digital workplace to 1805, and the installer time will vary depending upon the option you choose for the data migration. As I explained earlier, if you happen to take care of the migration as part of post install, the install finishes in less than 15 minutes and it lays down the binary and create brand new blank DWP database. I would like to highlight here the packages needed for migration must be of 1805 patch 1, where we significantly improved on timing it takes to migrate the items. In upcoming slide, we will talk in depth and also watch a demo about how to run these utilities as well as some troubleshooting. Once the data transfer and social data migration complete, you are ready to upgrade your secondary nodes to 1805. This can be done in parallel, or you can provision additional hardware to have these secondary nodes of DWP pre-built to 2002 and update the dwp.xml file located under Tomcat conf Katarina localhost to point to the production or specific environment in order to achieve high availability configurations for digital workplace. We will review the high availability within DWP in upcoming slide. Installation on secondary nodes are fairly quick, somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes per node, and it can be done in parallel. Next step in our installation process is to install the DWP integration patch for 2002. Though the name suggests 1908, this package is still compatible with 2002 and only takes about 4 minutes to complete. One other important point is you do not need to run the installer as we have seen for 1805. This package is a D2P based package which saves time accessing the machine and running the installer. Once you download the package, you'll have to make sure to extract the package and import DWP 1908 for ITSM 1808 package to the deployment manager console. I have seen customers cases where they stating the package is not getting imported, hence wanted to call it out. The second package in that zip is completely optional and most of the upgrade cases you can skip as the sample data already exists in the system. Once the D2P package deployment complete on the ITSM stack, you are ready to upgrade your DWP 1805 to DWP 2002. You can use this as your opportunity to convert from Oracle Java to Open Java as part of the install, with caveat in mind that you're using Tomcat 8 or later version in order to support Open Java. Once primary DWP node upgraded to 2002, you can upgrade secondary nodes to 2002 in parallel. Last item that I would like to call out is make sure that you always apply the latest hotfixes available around the upgrade time in order to prevent you from severity one type of issues post upgrade. I would like to call one important fact throughout this installation is when you would like to assess the timing for production upgrade and the production go live, make sure you consider below important points. First, replicate the production data set in lower environments, including Mongo database dump. So make sure you export AR system database, your existing Smart IT, My IT database, Mongo database dump to a lower environment. Run through the development, QA, performance environment to make sure the timing you are getting is accurate. Make a construction document for your upgrade and attach it with a change request that you're going to execute on a production day. Make sure all the use cases get evaluated during a QA run and you can get a sign up from the tester to make sure there are no surprises after post-production go live. I would like to take a moment and discuss this install screen which you will see during 1805 upgrade on a primary node. This is super important screen when you perform an upgrade on primary server. If you do not see the screen, cancel the installer and make sure you check the myit installed configuration.xml and confirm the two properties. The first property is BMC underscore myit underscore primary underscore node, and the value needs to be true. And the other property is BMC underscore myit underscore secondary underscore node. That property needs to be false. So we are checking this configuration file just to make sure that the designated server is come as primary in order for you to see this option. If you don't see this installer screen, make the appropriate changes to that configuration file in order for you to see the screen. So let us quickly discuss what are the different options on the screen. So the first radio button indicates that you want the installer to create a new DB and run the data transfer social migration as part of the installer. I do not recommend this option to heavy production environments. The second radio button indicates that you do not use Smart IT and installer will continue to use same old database. This option is used along with the option 4, which is the checkbox to run the social data migration. I wouldn't recommend this option either if you are a heavy DWP production environment. The third radio button indicates that you do use both DWP and Smart IT, but you will take care of data transfer and social migration as part of the post install. This is what we recommend to all customer upgrading from a previous version who have large DWP and Smart IT data. With this option, installers either create a DWP database or let you specify the pre-created DWP database. With this option, installer complete very quickly as it only lays down binaries along with blank DWP database. Advantage of this options over other two is you have the control of the migration, and if you make a mistake in the migration step, you can correct yourself and rerun the migration or a data transfer and does not need to rerun the installer, which involve restore of VM snapshot. Once you choose the third option and complete the installer, you can then use 1805 patch 1 data transfer and social migration script for migrating your data from Smart IT, My IT combined database to new DWP database, as well as from Mongo database to newly built the DWP database. We will discuss both of these utilities in detail, and also I will show you a quick demo in upcoming slide. As the name suggests, the data transfer utility transfer the data from old Smart IT database to new DWP database that got built along with 1805 installation. Data includes appointment, schedules, asset action, asset types, cart, cart items, catalog how to, catalog section, category info, device token, feature settings, favorites, provider settings, how to, floor map, floor map asset, configuration params, configuration parameters, locations. So all this data that got stored into the combined smart ID my ID database, by running the data transfer utility, you are taking this data out of your old database and transferring that to the new DWP database. It is very important to get an idea on estimation on how long this data transfer utility will take based on the production data set. And hence I recommend all my customer to refresh lower environment with copy of production database. As part of data transfer, we run the run underscore export batch or shell script depending upon the operating system, and it will generate the export.zip file with all the XMLs that I talked about. That includes configuration params, parameters, locations. If you have multiple DWP tenants, you have to adjust the statenv and run this run export script multiple times, and it will produce the number of export.zip file. Timing for export is solely depend upon record exist in DWP database. Prior you start, I would highly recommend to do below, which is take a count on device underscore token, user underscore sessions, user underscore service tables available in Smart IT database, as data transfer estimation is solely rely on number of record exist in those tables. You can clear these tables prior to the production upgrade in order to save time taken for the export import. The data that gets stored in device token, user sessions, and user service is only needed for reporting purposes, and there is no impact if you delete that data on the functionality of the product. The amount of time taken for export will be the exact time taken to import the records when you run the run underscore import.zip to import the data to the new DWP database. If you need to calculate, it will export about 1000 records per second, and it will also take about 1000 records per second to import. So depending upon the number of records in tables such as user preferences, device token, user session, user service, user details, the time will vary. Now we'll look the time for the data transfer. Let us look at social data migration. This utility will help you to migrate the data from Mongo database to new DWP database. Unlike data transfer, you do not need to run this utility two times for export and import. This utility will connect to Mongo database at runtime and insert the records into the new DWP database by creating additional tables within DWP business schema, as you can see on the screen. After running migration, it creates all these S2 tables, which will give you a short of an idea of what data is getting migrated to new DWP database. BMC also provided the Mongo migration consult utility, which will give you an output indicating how much data you want to take it to the new DWP database and how long you will expect it to run. Key important takeaway from this slide is to make sure you use 1805 patch 1 social migration utility. Make sure you do tests in lower environment with production database copy to identify the time taken for the migration, which will help you to set the outage window for the production. Make sure you only take 1 to 2 year worth of Mongo data, as nobody cares for the bell notification for 2 year close event, bit approval broadcast service health, and it also will limit the number of attachments from past close requests to be taken to the new DWP database. Now we have reviewed the logistics for running data transfer and data migration utilities. Let us quickly look at the demo of running data transfer and data migration utilities. I have upgraded my DWP node from DWP 1802, which was using a Mongo database, to DWP 1805. As you can see, the DWP version is 1805, and the DWP previous version was 1802.00. Before I jump directly to execution of utilities, I wanted to take a minute and show you the installer screen for the 1805. So this is the first 1805 installer screen that we touch base during our prerequisite installation process, talking about taking a backup of databases. The second screen that you can see on my screen indicating that I will take care of the migration as part of post install. So by selecting the option 3. The third screen indicating I'm providing MS SQL Server details and I'm providing a new database name DWP webinar with the username and password. And the last screen indicating that we are upgrading from 1802 versions to 1805, and this is our install locations. So under program files, BMC software, smart IT, my IT, there will be a folder called DWP, and this is my old database details that you can see on my screen. And this is the Tomcat location, and this will be my new DWP database information, which the installer will create blank DWP database. And this is the last screen for the installation completed successfully. At this point, once the 1805 install completed, and if you try and attempt to log into DWP, so I'm just trying to go ahead and try to log in, I'll be presented with an error 1013, which means that the user does not exist on the new DWP database. We are going to run the data transfer utility to migrate the data to new DWP database. And once we successfully run the data transfer and social migration, we'll try and log in again to this same screen. As you can see, I logged into the DWP node by doing a remote desktop, and I have already downloaded the 1805 patch 1 package for social and data migration utilities. After I extract the package, I could see that this utilities thing that we are interested is migration utils. Once I get into the migration utilities, you can see the two folders. One is for my IT data transfer and the social to migration zip, which I extracted it, and you can see these are the two files. In order to run the data transfer, I updated the file setenv.bat that exists, as you can see, in migration utilities my IT data transfer. And if I go to script, I see this file called setenv.bat. So as you can see on my screen, I have updated these values here. So the first change that I did is Java home, indicating where my Java is. At line number 8, I indicated the tenant ID. You can have one or multiple tenants. So I think for every tenant, you have to update this file and run it again. Line number 11 indicating whether my database is MS SQL or Oracle. And I think pretty much the last thing that I modified on this was the Java opt variable. I uncommented this and indicating that for this utility, assign 2 gig heap in order to run this faster. The second file that we modified was MS SQL connection.properties. And as you can see on my screen, I'm just taking out this MS SQL connection.properties where we updated the details about the host name of the database, the port, business DB name or system DB name, and the username and password for respective business and system schema. If you don't know this information or you forgot to take a screenshot during installation time, you can always go back and get this information from the file called smartit.xml, which exists, as you can see on my screen, under tomcat 85conf catalina localhost smartit.xml. So here you can see that we are connecting to the database. This is the database host. This is the database name. This is the database port, and this is the database username, and then this is the password. So once you got this detail jot down, come back to this MS SQL connection.properties and enter those details and save it. Once you update both this file setenv.bat and MS SQL connection.properties, we are ready to run the utility. So I'll quickly go back to the command prompt. So I quickly went into the command prompt, as you can see, and I'm at to the location where my utility exists. So my utility is 1805 in the temp directory, and I went to this data structures within script. And if I do a dir here, I can see all these utilities. So the utilities, as we are taking the data out of the database, we are running run underscore export dot bat. So let us run that file. Uh, as you can see, I correctly pick up my tenant ID that is specified in setenv.bat file, and it is trying and exporting the data now. As you can see that it trying and exporting the data for all these tables. I can list few of the tables: tenant provider, provider setting, user sessions, category info, SRD info, push notification, SRD settings, and I think it looks like it is completed now. So it gives the message entities have been exported, and it took about 691 milliseconds. So you can click on any key to continue. I should be able to see the export.zip file. So as you can see, I can see the export.zip file. So depending upon the data that you have, you'll see the size bigger or smaller sunset. So if I just double click on this, you can see that all of this data that has been exported from those smart IT database, which we are going to import into the new DWP database. Now the export is completed. The next part for us to get this data imported to the new DWP database. You can also check out the successful or failure of the messages within this log that exists in script logs. So if I open this file and try to see that, so it will give you the clear messages, how long each of export utility take, and where if there are any errors, you can always come here and check that. In order to save time, I went ahead and updated the MS SQL connection properties to point out the target database, indicating this is my host name, port, and these are my new DWP database details. Again, if you do not know any of these details or you forgot to take screenshot, you can again go back to the dwp.xml file that exists in tomcat85 conf catalina localhost dwp.xml. This file does have information about the database port and what is your database name, what is your database username, and the password. So after you capture all this detail, you go back here in the MS SQL connection properties, update those details, and you are ready to run the utility again to import that into the target DWP database. So let me just clear this, do a dir. So this time we are going to run the command run underscore import dot bat. As you can see that it picked up the tenant ID that we specified in setenv, and it is saying transferring export.zip file. So it is actually transferring and importing that. So as you can see that now all the actions here is for importing is instead of exporting. So as you can see all this importing happening. So it looks like it has been imported successfully. As you can see that next utility that we are going to execute is social migration utility, which will take the Mongo data to new DWP database. So as you can see on my screen, I'm on this migration utilities and I went into the social to migration. The first file that we updated was this setenv.bat. So in this batch file, as you can see on my screen, I updated couple things. On line number 5, I updated the Java location. Then if DWP is running on MS SQL, set this value to true. Then the next part that we updated is line number 24, indicating the Mongo DB connection URL. If you don't know where to get this URL, you can refer to the file called config.js. So that config.js file exists in this location, smart IT, my IT, smart IT, my IT, social config.js. And here you can see that this is the URL and this is the database name. So I updated that information. The other information that updated was this DWP JDBC connection URL. Again, I got this from dwp.xml file. So as you can see in DWP XML file, we have this complete JDBC URL. I just pasted that into the setenv, and then I entered the DWP business user details. The next thing that I entered was this days before. So here you can see that you can enter the data for all, or you can enter the data for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or 365 days. So once you modified this, I think you are ready to execute the utility. I went to this path, DWP 1805 migration utility social to migration. At this point, if I do a dir, I see all these files. So in order to see whether are we able to successfully connect to the Mongo database or not, you are going to run the command migration notification console.bat. Let's see whether we can able to execute that successfully. So as I'm running this migration console.bat, as you can see that it is trying to connect to the Mongo database now. As you can read from the screen, I only have 5 notifications as this is the test system and doesn't have any bulk load up attachment. And the total migration time that it is going to take is couple milliseconds. At this point, I will run the migration all command to migrate my Mongo data. I'll just do dir again and I'll do migration all.bat. At any case, during this migration that if you run into error, you can always execute the migration clean. So as you can see that I executed the utility called migration all.bat. And as you can see that it is trying to import the data now for the user collections, for the group post comment, user follow, user mention. So all of this data, as you can see that I have mentioned with 12 number count. And then I have 2 following, 3 assets, 5 likes, 26 users, 4 contact. All this data has been migrated and the migration time is 2 milliseconds. So at this point, I'll just disconnect. Now we have run both data transfer and data migration utilities. I will just simply try and log in here again and see if we can see the data again. So as you can see, we logged in, we able to see the catalog, all the quick links. The catalog is set up for us. We can also see the notifications for this user in the My Activity section. We can see all of this data, which insists of checking into the locations and following the user timeline. All this data has been successfully shown in the user timeline. Now, if I go back and try to go to the admin console just to see whether the data is still there, and I can see yes, all my help desk appointment are there. The broadcast which I actually had previously, I had that there. And do I have the existing report section? Yes, I can see the data has been preserved here as well. These are the services that I had created prior to the upgrade, so I still see those. And if I come to the DWP again and try to see whether can I actually access all this feature like location, yes, I can still see the location. All my location has been populated successfully and all my floor maps also been shown up correctly. So it looks like all our data has been successfully migrated at this point. And just to show you again, we are on this 1805 version now. At this point, as your 1805 install and post migration has been completed successfully, you can run the 1805 installation on all the secondary nodes and then proceed with 2002 installation on the primary servers. Once you install 2002 on primary and secondary servers, we will take a look at the post install activities. Once you complete the upgrade to Digital Workplace 2002 on all primary and secondary nodes, along with the latest hotfixes, steps that need and attentions are availability setup for your DWP nodes. This steps also applicable if you are provisioning an additional hardware for all the secondary nodes to Digital Workplace in order to separate them from the Smart IT. Along with availability, you also need to take care of the RSSO configuration and notification configurations on this DWP node. There is also a change warranted in load balancer configuration and rebranding work. In rebranding work, if you are coming from an old version and once you upgrade to DWP 2002, the rebranding tool itself is available within DWP admin console. This rebranding tool is available within Digital Workplace starting from DWP version 1902 and later. So the advantage of using rebranding tool over the legacy CSS is basically you do not have to re-sign the mobile app. You don't have to maintain the CSS and copy to all DWP nodes. Once you use the rebranding tool, all the changes will store at the database level, and be it your browser or be it a mobile device, you can see those rebranding changes immediately. I've broken all these post activities in 3 blocks. The first item is availability, the second one being the RSSO configuration, and the third one being the setting up notification. Let us quickly review these post-install activities in upcoming slides. I'm talking in this slide in the context of if you have added additional hardware for DWP nodes when setting up high availability. If you are coming from an existing high availability setup where you have more than one node, some of the instructions are still applicable. DWP high availability indicates the nature of handling requests. When one node is down, user should not get impacted. Also, DWP high availability can be spread across different sites in order to take advantage of disaster recovery. On screen, you can see the diagram indicating there are 3 DWP nodes after the upgrade to 2002. End user will access the DWP via a load balancer URL, and you can add as many DWP nodes behind this load balancer. One important change you would want to do at the load balancer level is to make sure the load balancer accepts the request at server name /DWP along with server name /UX. If you do not take these changes of LB configuration seriously, you may end up losing notification as the end user notification will start to have /DWP within URL, which load balancer could not able to parse it. We always recommend you to point out AR load balancer instead of individual AR. This way you are highly scalable and add as many AR nodes under the AR load balancer, just like DWP load balancer. Now we looked at the architectural side. Let us quickly take a look at the configuration slide. In high availability setup, if you would like to leverage the push notification for your Apple Android devices, make sure the APN gateway ports are enabled at the load balancer level as well as the individual host level. As you know that recently Apple announced that they are not going to support the legacy binary protocol starting November 2020. Apple has introduced a new protocol, and we can still be able to use the same port for Apple push notification. Just make a note, an individual node must also be able to connect to these gateways in order to be successfully receive the push notification on your end user devices. In most of the time, you'll have to add exception on this production DWP nodes, as most likely those nodes have an access to the internet. Make sure when you setting up the DWP nodes for high availability, plan for disaster recovery and do not place all your DWP nodes in one site or one data center so that you can take an advantage. If one site goes down, the DWP nodes available within the other site will still take the user load and there is no direct impact to the end users. In high availability setup, there will be a concept of primary and secondary. So the primary server will be designated on the basis of the property master.server equal to true in the connect DWP properties that exist under Tomcat / external connect directory. If none of your DWP nodes have this parameter set to true, the end user notification will not work. You will not see the bell notification, end user will not see the email notification, and then you'll see what's actually happening. So one of the reasons is like to have couple things. The master.server is to true. The poller has to be enabled within that file connect-dwp.properties. The last step in high availability is to decide whether you want to SSL at individual DWP node level or a load balancer level. Again, when you implement the SSL, most of the time you will end up updating the Tomcat server.xml indicating what the port that you would like to use for SSL. You can specify certificate details within server.xml. Lots of organization either set up the SSL at the load balancer level and upload the SSL traffic at the individual node level, which was not set up to part of SSL in order to save some certificate cost. But I have seen organization can do end-to-end tunneling and then have SSL at the node level as well as at the load balancer level. Let us quickly look at configuring digital workplace for an RSSO integrations. Just make a note that RSSO agents libraries by default ships with the digital workplace installation. You do not need to run a separate RSSO agent installation in order to configure RSSO for Digital Workplace. RSSO agent configuration must be done on each individual DWP nodes. You can simply copy the file RSSO agent properties and RSSO SSO SDK properties from first node once it is configured to all other DWP secondary nodes. Lot of times, if the DWP and Smart IT hosted on the same Tomcat, you may run into RSSO jar compatibility issues, and hence BMC recommends that you run Smart IT and DWP on a different nodes. If you cannot run both of these applications on different nodes, at least you can run DWP and Smart IT on a different Tomcats on the same host. After the upgrade, if you have chosen to have separate database for DWP, you must manually update the SAML authentication on newly created DWP database. If you also have DWP catalog, make sure that the SSO SDK properties exist, as it does have the parameter ignore-tenant to true in order for you to successfully authenticate. All this RSSO jar file exists in location for Windows. It is under tomcat /external conf/lib. In case of Linux, it will be under tomcat 85 /external conf/lib. Now we have looked at the high availability, the rebranding, the SSL, and the RSSO configuration. Let us quickly talk about the notification sections. So Digital Workplace supports email notification, in-app notification, and push notification. You can review the configuration file called connect DWP properties located under tomcat /external conf directory. So on the screen, you can see that there are parameters which indicate what is the details of your SMTP servers. Whenever you troubleshooting the notification issues, make sure you have DWP debug logs enabled, and you can also review these files, connect-dwp.properties, and make sure there are a couple parameters exist. One is master.server is equal to true. The second being the SMTP server details being provided if you are leveraging the email notification, and none of the notification being in-app or push notification or email notification not working. You can also check whether notification poller is enabled or not. In order to generate the DWP debug logging, you can log into DWP admin console, and from the admin console logging, you can set the logging level to debug in order to get more messages logged to dwp.log. This dwp.log exists into the directory where you install the product. So most of the time, if you are using a default location, it will be under opt bmc smart it my it /dwp/log in case of upgrade. In case of fresh install, it will be under /opt bmc dwp/logs. These are for Linux. In case of Windows, it's the same, like program files, BMC software, smart it my it /dwp/log. Or for fresh stack, it will be under program files, BMC software, dwp/dwp/logs. So in the event you're not able to self-solve these problems, you can always send this connect dwp.properties along with debug dwp logs when you open a support case within BMC support. I would like to take a moment to discuss the newly published troubleshooting guides for the BMC Digital Workplace. We would like to bring to your attention the efforts being put into all these troubleshooting guides to create and publish in our documentation pages. Purpose or goal of these troubleshooting guides are to better understand the concept, to identify the problem, and to self-solve the problems. And in the event you are not able to self-solve, then you are already have the items and data needed to open a better support case. As highlighted on this Digital Workplace troubleshooting page, you can see the troubleshooting section is in the top level of the navigation pane, as well as the link highlighted on the bottom right of the screen. Let us quickly dive in troubleshooting some common issues. Most of the time, we have seen customers raise 7 cases right after the upgrade, stating after the upgrade to Digital Workplace, users are unable to log in. 99% of the time, the cause is either SAML authentication was not set to true, or RSSO agent properties or SSO SDK properties either do not have values, as the upgrade simply put the blank files, or one of these files have incorrect entries. So you have to make sure that you populate the entries in RSSO agent properties, SSO SDK properties, and the SAML authentication has been set correctly. Even after reviewing these configurations, you see that users are unable to log in. You can review the tomcat/logs. The log that you need to review is localhost.det within the tomcat and RSSO agent log to get better understanding on the error in order to self-help and resolve the issue. Another common issue we a lot of time here is the data transfer utility, which transfer the data from existing Smart IT database to new DWP database, is taking way longer in production upgrade than in QA. Number one root cause for this is lower environment has not been tested against the production data set, and there are millions or tens of thousands record exists in device token, user session, user service tables, which was missing in lower lane. As indicated on the screen, you can either take backup of these tables and truncate those tables prior to upgrade, as those tables are meant for reporting purposes. You will also need to take an account that data transfer export does about 1000 records per second and does import around 1000 records per second. So depending upon the number of records listed on the table that you can see on the screen, timing for total data transfer will vary. One important takeaway is always do your work prior to upgrade by examining these tables carefully. Another problem we've seen in upgrade cycle is the social migration utility, which takes care of your Mongo data to new DWP database, failed to run successfully. You can review the migration log that being generated when you run the tool carefully to know the root cause for the failure. I would like to indicate one of the failure where if the user ID is greater than 60 character, social migration will fail, as within DWP schema, the user ID column is only 60 characters. You can examine these records in Mongo with command that you see on the screen to identify the user length and either to delete those user records. Most of the time, I have seen those accounts as service account, and it should be fine to delete those user records from MongoDB. I would also like you to take advantage of our planning worksheet, which greatly document the details of your plan in order to be successful with the upgrade. You can use these sheets to make a construction document for your production upgrade. I also listed some of the doc references for high availability and troubleshooting. In case you would want to leverage Detailed Workplace Catalog that is available as part of Detailed Workplace Advanced Suite, you can review the webinar which provide very good insight on the DWP catalog installations. Let us quickly summarize what we learned so far from this webinar. First, we reviewed the pre-work required along with some high-level steps for you to be at 2002 and how to account the time needed for DWP upgrade. Second, key point that we discussed is to do a dress rehearsal for your production upgrade when you do QA and performance environments, which runs on similar hardware and production data sets. Third, we learn what steps required after the installation, such as making changes to load balancer, rebranding your application, configuring your DWP nodes for high availability, and setting up notification in order for end user when clicking on their request, take them to their appropriate request and not just redirect them to the home page. We also learn about some known issues within troubleshooting. I hope you find this information is helpful. Thank you everyone. At this point, I would like to hand it over to Greg to take it further.
Thank you. And now I'll take us through the self-help in contacting BMC. The YouTube channel where this webinar will be posted is listed here. It contains past webinars as well as a rich set of how-to videos. The Connect with BMC Helix ITSM and Remedy webinar schedule is available at this community's link. And the hot off the press newsletter for trending information is available at this community's post. As always, contacting technical support via web, phone, email, and these social channels is available. At this time, that will conclude this webinar. Thank you for attending.